You are listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson of Pro D Machining, and this week I'm very happy to welcome Nushrat Ahmed. Welcome, Nush.
Thank you. Yay. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm pumped to have you on. So who are you and what do you do?
My name is Nush, and I'm a Swiss machine operator at Trend South in Mooresville, North Carolina, also known as Race City, USA. And I make titanium and steel valve locks for motorsport and power sport applications.
Awesome. Well, let's get into your backstory, because I know, like, when I was looking at the things you've done, I hadn't even heard of some of these, the school you went to. I was like, oh, that's super cool. So let's get into it. How did you get in manufacturing? I know from the Patreon, James Mayette was asking, who and what got you into mechanical things. So let's start at the beginning.
So mechanical things, I guess you could say my love for Hot Wheels, because our house was full of Hot Wheels instead of like Barbie dolls and whatnot. So I realized like maybe I want to do something with cars. And in my sophomore year, I kind of flunked out of computer science. And I was like, I need to take a class. Let me just take auto tech. And I really enjoyed that class. And my teachers also said I excelled. So I was like, okay, cool. I think I'll just be an auto tech. Why not be a race tech? Because that sounds really cool. And there was a school in North Carolina called NASCAR Technical Institute. And so I applied, and it was like it's an 100% acceptance rate. So there was no reason for me to get denied. And I found out that they had a NASCAR pit program, which was like, what is that? I'm intrigued. Basically, it's a 15-week course, 5 classes where you do NASCAR fabrication, chassis applications, and you have a pit crew class where you actually like take tires off a car and put them back on. Yeah, it's a lot.
And that sounds epic.
Mm-hmm,
how cool.
It's the whole reason I went to the school, really. But while I was in school, I had 3-hour classes, and I was like, okay, I have more time to work and make money. So I decided to apply for a CNC job that paid $18 an hour, and I was able to survive off of that. So then I realized, oh, it's actually really interesting. Let me see if I could find more information on this. NASCAR Tech actually has a CNC course. I didn't take it because I didn't want to spend another 9 months in school, but that kind of opened up another path for me to study. And I realized I really enjoyed it. I really excelled at it. So let me try to do more with it. After I graduated, I had actually left that job because of the pit crew class being 6 hours long. So after I finally graduated from NTI, I got this job at a machine shop called Victory One in Mooresville, which is the place I currently work at. And basically, yeah, that's my story. I'm learning a lot. I got transferred over to the Swiss machine side. So that's been it's kind of like when you're standing in an empty hallway and all of a sudden all the lights turn on. All of a sudden there's so many more pathways I can go down. So I guess that's how I got introduced into manufacturing.
Okay. I want to jump back to NTI really quick. What kind of classes go into this program? So you said it's 9 months. Mm-hmm. What kind of classes were you doing? What does a schedule look like?
Like I had
never, just the one that you took. Oh. I've never heard of this program at all. And that sounds like something I would have loved to do. Yeah. So, for everybody listening who might be looking for their next move, what goes into this?
So NASCAR Technical Institute, also known as Universal Technical Institute, is basically an automotive school. They also have motorcycle mechanics and I believe a marine applications course. But I took the automotive technician course, which basically has brakes, undercars, manual transmission, auto transmission, like classes to basically help the technicians of tomorrow is what they call them. And yeah, I think NTI is the only one that has the CNC course, and they just opened up a robotics course, I think, in 2023, the end of 2023. So that was really cool.
Very cool. So then what makes it, because I've heard of UTI, what makes it NASCAR? Like, are you working on...
You're working on NASCAR. A lot of NASCAR teams come and use our dyno. I think basically because of the NASCAR pit program, is how they got their name. They're also the only school sponsored by NASCAR. And because we're located in Mooresville, which is Race City, USA.
Okay. Very cool. That sounds like a ton of fun. And definitely what a cool way to kind of find your way into manufacturing. Like, I've told my story on here a million times, but I also did not expect to be in manufacturing. Like, I took my first machining course as just like, oh yeah, I need a gen ed, elective. So I'll take Mac 110, I think it was, or 101 or something. And, equally fell in love with it. It was like, oh, this is what I want to do. This is super cool.
I wish we had a machining course at my high school. We had a really good technical program though. Like they had a lot of industries represented. I just wish we had a manufacturing class there. That'd be really cool too.
Yeah, my high school was equally. They've positioned themselves as a college prep high school, so there was zero technical education. Like if I wanted the classes that I took were theater productions because we got to build stuff. Like we built all the sets. So we had a full wood shop and could build all the, everything that you saw on stage. But like if I wanted to get hands on with any kind of building in high school, that was the only direction I could take.
Oh, at least we had a carpenter class. We did have a carpenter class. That was pretty sick.
Yeah. And in your backstory, so I've listened to a few of your interviews. You were on, spacing on the name of the podcast.
Manufacturing Culture Podcast, right?
It was the other one.
Femcanic Garage.
Yes, Femcanic Garage. So you were talking about a mentor of yours. That was another job in there. Did you work for her?
Yeah, I interned for her, actually. First of all, thank you for listening to that episode. That was back when I didn't know anything about manufacturing also. So that was just cars. But Jay Shia is the owner of Madhouse Motors in Boston. She kind of started my whole career, basically. Like I watched her work and I was like, oh, I want to be her. She is the most independent, amazing woman that I've ever met. The fact that when I met her, she was like, yeah, I'll take you under my wing. I was like, oh, okay. Yes, she was basically my ticket out of the house to get my hands dirty. My parents really support what I do now, but back then they were kind of like, you want to get your hands dirty? That's a little, right? So, but I kind of used Jay. I was like, well, Jay, she's a good woman. She's a good person and she's going to keep me safe and she's going to teach me things. So shout out to her for that. Yeah.
That's great. So was that before NTI or on breaks?
That was during high school.
How did that work? Okay. That's super cool. What an awesome internship to find while you're kind of figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great. So yeah, let's get into what you do daily. You said you're into Swiss now. Are you setting up? Are you programming?
I'm doing a little bit of setting up, mainly setting tools and stuff. I'm trying to get more into programming. So I'm watching a lot of YouTube videos because I like free resources. I like free things. So YouTube is my favorite thing ever. The LinkedIn Learning platform is amazing. Podcasting is amazing. I learned so much through just podcasts alone that I kind of think that's the reason why I got my transfer in the beginning, because I kind of wowed my trainer. I was like, yeah, I know all these things just from listening to these people talk about these things. And he was like, okay. And kind of gave me a chance because I proved myself.
So you're setting up now, or you're starting to set up more. Mm-hmm. You're running and then you want to learn programming. Mm-hmm. And programming Swiss is a hard thing to find resources on in general. I know a lot of friends and, past guests now have been on the show and they've learned either on the job or from family members or, other people on Instagram, but it's not like mills or lathes where, we've got Titans or we've got all these other online resources now. Swiss is definitely a tough one, I think, to learn. And so I applaud you for, jumping in with both feet.
It's crazy. I don't know why, but when he kind of when my former trainer introduced me to the Swiss machines, I was like, is this really any different than a lathe? Because hear me out. I'd only been running a lathe for like a year. I've never ran a mill before. So I was like, okay, lathes are like pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Swiss lathes are pretty difficult, but like kind of the same concept. And then he started really getting into it. And I was like, oh, there's a lot more than just XYZ. It's a lot more than that. But so the other day I did my own setup. It was pretty nerve wracking, but I was able to do it. So there's like a lot more days like that now. It used to be I was really nervous and like I didn't have any confidence. And that kind of ruined me a little bit because I'd be like, why am I having a stomach ache over something that I know I can do? So I feel like this week I've been a little bit calmer. I've been able to do things, get them done.
Yeah. Honestly, don't beat yourself up too much about that, because like I'd much rather hire someone who feels nervous and then gets through it than somebody who just recklessly has too much confidence and screws it up and, you know, blindly runs through a setup. And I find from that nervousness and that stress that you gain both perspective and the ability to kind of critique yourself and know where potential errors might be. Like that. I mean, I was just talking to Brad about that at the shop yesterday or today. He was like, do you ever find that you'll hit cycle start and then immediately go check and make sure you made that offset correctly? And I'm like, yeah, every time. That's, you know, why we make fewer mistakes than we used to.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, you know, as long as it's not just me.
Like, I don't care how many times I've set this program up before. I'm going to op stop it every single time. And then I'm going to single block it when I get to my drill. That's just how it is, because I've had many times, not many times, but like I could count on one hand how many times I've broken a drill because I didn't single block it to make sure that it would clear. And now that I know not to do that, I'm going to take that extra 10 seconds to make sure. But yeah, thank you. I mean, like, I feel like sometimes my nerves are like my downfall sometimes, but at the same time, it's definitely a strength because I can keep myself in check. And I take a lot of notes, so like that also keeps me in check. So I don't know. I feel like that works for me.
Yeah. I find better machinists aren't thinking, what's the worst that can happen? They're thinking, here's all of the bad things that can happen, and I'm going to plan against them. And I'm going to make sure they don't happen. So I'd rather be on that side of the coin than the other, for sure. So then what's next for you at your job? Are they, you said they're kind of pushing you more into a setup role?
I'm not really sure. I think I'm just trying to learn everything that I can from my current trainer about everything that he does, basically. So, and there's so much more for me to learn from him. Not just about the actual machining aspect, but what you do after, for example, like our shipping or receiving process. So yeah, I think, and I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that. I think that's
really important. That's a super important point, because I've always said that, like, I learned more about being a good machinist when I worked in quality than I ever did just brute forcing machining. Because, you know, you can make the prettiest parts in the world that you think are perfect, but until you can prove to your customer, even if you're making them internally for your own internal customer, if you can't prove that they're good, it doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. I can make the prettiest scrap on the planet and it's still scrap. So I think that recognizing that your job extends further than just pushing the button and making the part and setting up the part is super important.
Yeah, our quality engineer is kind of inspiring me to take a GD&T course. And he was like, yeah, it's a really good idea. You should definitely take it. And I'm like, okay, bet 100%. And he's also like somebody else that's a mentor to me. So shout out to him. Also, I noticed you have little U-line bins in the back.
Yeah, I do.
We use those. I mean,
what better way to organize my office, right?
Smart. Look at, do you see my organization? It's not that great.
Yeah, I like it. No, it's good.
Thank you.
Color coded and everything.
Thank you.
Let's get into some questions from the audience. From the Patreon, Graham Francis was asking, what are the specs of your car and how are you liking your new house? Oh. And that's a part of your backstory that we didn't bring up, because you kind of got into this whole thing because you got a car too, right?
Yeah, actually, yeah. My car is a 2007 Mustang GT. Specs of it, it's a 4.6 liter V8 and it's a manual. She's my pride and joy, like basically my whole personality. if you knew me 4 years ago, you knew I wouldn't talk about anything but my car. My car is my background on my laptop. Like, she is the love of my life, basically. Um, and I love my new house. It's is this on video? No, you can't see, but I have a yarn room. That's how much room I have in my house now. I can have my own yarn room. And I also have a truck. I don't ever talk about my truck, but I really love my truck too. It's a 1994 Toyota pickup. Chris told me he has a Toyota too. I was like, oh, sick, Toyota supremacy. But
yeah,
she's
I
a
saw
trooper.
you post a picture yesterday or today, and I was like, oh, that's a sick truck.
Thank you. Yeah, she's my baby.
Well, that's awesome. Let's see. Becca Wolfinger asked, what are your career goals? So what's next? You know, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Everywhere. I want to travel. That's my goal, low-key, is to get more exposure in the industry. I want to be able to talk to different groups about manufacturing, mainly kids, because when I was in Buffalo traveling to see my parents, every single little kid I found, I sat them down and I was like, hey, kid, what do you want to do when you're older? Do you want to go to college? Let me tell you about something better. You know, just kind of like poisoning them a little bit, but in the best way possible.
Yeah, we need that.
We need that, exactly. And they were interested too. Like, they were like, oh, we can make our own businesses. Oh, we can make things. Like, that's cool. Yeah, you can. You can be really cool, kid. Like, but I realized I really liked that and connecting with them. And I didn't just connect with little kids. I also connected with their parents, because their parents, a lot of their moms, didn't go to school. So they do work in factories, basically manufacturing things. I'm like, hey, you could really, lock in on that and actually make it turn into something bigger. So I was able to talk to a lot of like aunties and uncles about that too, which was pretty cool. And I see myself learning a lot. I don't see myself going to college in 5 years, but I see myself taking a lot of certification courses, because I like to get the answers to everything. I like to know everything before I go into something. So
that's killer. Yeah, learning for the sake of like knowledge is so much more fun, and it's so much easier for me personally. Like it's so funny. I went to college for a couple years for mechanical engineering, and even took classes that now I'm like, oh, I wish I had paid attention, because now I have like the reason to know. Like, I took a material sciences course and we talked about hardening things, and we talked about, all kinds of metals and their structures. And at the time I was like, this is the most boring crap I've ever heard. And then I started working with metals and working with hardening metals. And I was like, kind of wish I remembered all of that stuff.
I wish I paid attention. No, I feel that. And I also kind of feel like it has to do with your age as well. Like, I feel like this might be controversial, but I don't feel like 18-year-olds should go to college, or 19-year-olds, because I feel like you're too young to put your brain through all of that. And like, it's kind of like learning a language. Like, when I was 10, I was trying to learn Korean because I wanted to copy my older sister, and I couldn't for the life of me remember the letters. All of a sudden, I revisited it when I was like 15, and I could kind of put words together. So when I'm older, it's easier to memorize things. It's easier to take them in. Wouldn't it be easier to do college classes when you're older? But a lot of people say it's harder for older people to go to college, which I also get. Which is why I'm team community college. But
me too. I went there.
A lot of people argue with me on that, and I'm like, I'm not here to fight though. I'm just here to talk, really.
I can't speak for all colleges, but like, I went to the U of A, and then I went to Pima Community College. And the first 2 years I was at Pima, I was retaking engineering courses. So these were back-to-back comparisons, and my classes at Pima were head and shoulders so much better than the education I received at the U of A, because at the U of A, 90% of the classes were taught by TAs, and like the instructor would have office hours and show up for tests or labs, but that was it. And then at Pima, it was people who had been in the industry, or, in the case of like math and stuff, were active mathematicians actually teaching my class, and there every day. And there was no TA taking the spot. Like, I could ask a real professor the question I had, and it was fantastic. It was so much better and way, way cheaper.
That's why I like the automotive school, because a lot of my instructors, they've been in the field before. Like in the NASCAR class, a lot of them were in like Monster Jam, for example. I had a teacher that worked on monster trucks. You worked on monster trucks? Like what? Like
That's
who
so
wouldn't
cool.
want to learn from you? So
Yeah.
I totally get that.
Yeah. Well, you know, all of my manufacturing teachers, machining teachers had been in the industry for 10 plus years, I think. And so like every single one of them, the reason I attribute doing so well is that one of my teachers, the guy who taught me G code and all of that, was working in the shop, working in a shop at the same time. Like he was actively a machinist during the day and then would teach at night, and like, you know, invited me into their shop to see what they were actually doing, and, you know, gave me additional resources and materials that he was using as a real machinist. And I was like, oh, like this is limitless. There's all the information I need, you know? So yeah, I'm very lucky to have failed into a profession.
I kind of feel like I failed into a profession too. Because if I passed computer science, maybe I would have been doing something like computer science related. But in my head, you know, I consider being a manufacturer like computer science or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I deal with computers every day.
Exactly.
I deal with math every day. You know, all these people that like say, it's so funny. Like Brad and I make fun of it all the time, of people who are like, oh, I told my teachers I'd never use math again, and look at me, I'm not using math. And I'm like, I use math every single day. Like, what are you talking about?
I can't believe I'm using math. I used to tell myself I would never use math. I hate math. I hated math. I had beef with every single one of my math teachers. And now I'm doing math for a living. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. Let's see. Tux Garage asked, what's your favorite brand or model of machine? And then what's the best way to learn how to do Swiss programming? Any suggested resources?
My favorite brand. I haven't really worked with that many. I think I like anything with a Fanuc controller, to be honest, because that's what I'm most comfortable with. I run Hanwhas right now, and I used to run Okumas, so, and I understand the Okuma control is also pretty easy. So I guess my favorite brand or model would be a Hanwha.
Okay.
Team Hanwha, you know, I don't know. And the best way to learn how to do Swiss programming, honestly, is to get your feet real dirty and ask somebody for them to take you under their wing. Like how you were saying earlier, it's really hard to get that sort of education from a book or from a video. You really need to be there doing it, getting your feet wet, you know, getting your hands dirty and all that. But if that's not possible, I'm a really big fan of YouTube. Like I said earlier, I YouTube everything. Podcasts
Have you found any good YouTube videos on, or YouTube channels on Swiss programming or Swiss lathes?
Yes, I actually have it saved on my what is it called? My homepage. On YouTube, I recommend the little shorts that Titan posts. He also posts them on LinkedIn too. Donnie is the one that runs the machine. First of all, he's funny. Second of all, his dog is adorable. And third of all, he's a really good, like, connection, I feel like. He knows what he's talking about, and the way that they set up their videos are really, like, a kid could watch it and actually be interested in it. It's sort of like a how it's made video.
Donnie's like my favorite Titan presenter
Really?
by far. Yeah.
Me too, actually. He's hilarious. And I think he's the first one that messaged me on LinkedIn, like reached out to me. And I was like, hi. And another one on YouTube is Dan Rudolph. He has like really good introductory videos. And he doesn't use very difficult terminology, like you can understand it. So I think that's nice. But
Dan's
to get comfortable with the terminology, I definitely recommend to like look through your podcast apps, because that's literally what I do. I just look up machining or manufacturing and I add a bunch of them to my station, and then I just go through and listen. Like Within Tolerance was the first ever podcast I've ever listened to that was related to the industry. I literally just looked up machining, first one that came up, and I played an episode, and then from there I literally just kept playing episodes. Actually,
That's awesome.
I was I was about to play Ethan's episode, Ethan Patane, and then I had paused it for some reason, and like I guess somehow got his attention on Instagram because I commented on a post, and then he messaged me, and I was like, I recognize this name, but I don't know this person. And then he was like, "Oh yeah, I was on With Intolerance," and I was like, "Shut up! I listened to that podcast. What are you talking about?" And like, go to the app, and I was like, "Oh, I was listening to your episode." Huh. But yeah, I like to think that I met him through the podcast, technically.
That's so cool. I love hearing connections that are made through the podcast. It's like
I got to visit
half
him and
the
make a
reason
duck.
that I love it.
Sorry.
You got to what?
I got to visit him in the summer and make a duck.
Make a duck?
Mm-hmm. We CNC'd a duck. Technically, he did it. I just kind of stood there and was like, whoa, like, what is this? That was also my first time, like, going to someone else's shop. Even though it was his school shop, that was my first time doing that. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Shop visits are so much fun. Like, even if it's, I love visiting any shop because it's just so interesting seeing the little differences. You're like, oh, you set things up that way. Oh, you organize things that way. And I always come away with something that, I want to change or I want to do better or something like that.
I think I'm definitely stealing his organization drawers. I don't know if you've seen them. He posts about them and I'm like, that's genius. I've kind of tried to, but my drawers aren't as nice as his. They're little plastic ones, but they work. They're weird. They work.
Yeah. Some organization is better than none. Exactly. That's for sure. Let's see. Tom asked, he'd like to understand education apprenticeship options and how that's worked out for you so far. So, NTI, all of that, like what would you recommend for someone looking to get into the industry like you? And what worked for you and what didn't work and, pitfalls and all of that?
So if you already know that you want to go into manufacturing, I would recommend finding a community college near you that has like a machining course or a manufacturing course. And if you don't want to do that, I also or if you do want to do that and then want to go above and beyond, I would say get some certifications like your GD&T or metallurgy certifications, because that kind of has you stand out and it's cheaper than going to college. And I feel like it's a little more well-rounded. As far as apprenticeships, I've never actually had any apprenticeships in any shops, but I mean, I don't see why you can't go to someone's shop and prove to them that you have the drive and the motivation because you're going there for an apprenticeship. I don't think anyone would say no.
Yeah. So do you find that the things you learned at NTI help you now? Things with the hand tools or any like the other stuff that you learned? Is there any crossover that you are happy that you have?
To be honest, not really, because I don't really work with cars, but I know what a valve is. I would have known what a valve was if I didn't go to NTI, but like, let's say I didn't, I wouldn't have. Or I wouldn't have known what a valve lock is. That's not actually true. I wouldn't have known what I was making at work if not for NTI. The like company that bought my company is called Race Winning Brands, and they make a lot of car parts. I wouldn't have known any of their car parts if I didn't go to NTI. But other than that, no, not really.
Okay. Fair enough. Let's see. So Windmill Motorsports, we kind of answered this, but he said, how do you go from a car fan to wanting to be a race engineer to a Swiss machine guru? So to kind of sideline that question, do you still want to be a race engineer? I know that was a big part of your story at the beginning. We talked about what your career goal is. Is that part of your career goal is to circle back and, get your engineering degree at some point? Or
maybe in like 10 years when it's more like financially a better decision, because I don't want to take out a big loan or anything like that. Or like, I don't even want to begin to think about that. But I feel like in 10 years from now, I would want to circle back to being like an F1 engineer, because I really like F1 more than NASCAR. But I also, again, don't really want to go to engineering school because I don't feel like I've heard a lot of stories about people struggling with engineering specifically, and I'm like, I didn't really do that well in high school, so am I really gonna do that well? Probably not, but if there was like a hands-on version of it, I'd be all there because I think I'm better hands-on than I am up here.
I totally can empathize and sympathize. Like I know that Ethan's program that he's at sounds the closest to somewhere that I might succeed because there is all of that hands-on and, you know, getting involved in formula and all that stuff. It sounds like if you're in that track with all of those people, like you can find the resources you need to get through the hard stuff and get to do the fun stuff on the side. So yeah, I'm right there with you. Like that's why I struggled so much in college was like, why do I care about all this theory? Like what does it actually mean? And then you start seeing practical examples and you're like, oh, now I want to learn it again.
Mm-hmm. Actually, yeah, when I was looking for colleges to apply to, I didn't really apply to any colleges when I was in high school, but when I was looking at schools that had a formula essay team. Then I was like, 4 years? I don't think I could push out another 4 years. I was like, high school took it out of me. And then I had to do like another year and a half. Ooh, didn't even want to do that.
Yeah, I totally understand that. So I had a couple of questions for you because you're younger than I am. You're getting into this. You're also very focused on education and all that. I've been trying to ask more and more guests, what do you think we can do as business owners or people in the community to bring more young people into it? And specifically for you as a woman in the industry, you know, how can we bring more women into the industry too?
I like it when people post videos. I know that some things you can't really share, especially if it's for customers, but I like to see, and a lot of people like to see like the how it's made sort of vibe from manufacturers. So like I feel like seeing videos like that being paired with voiceovers that actually explain what's going on in terms that like my little brother could understand, for example. And what was the second part of your question again?
How do we, bring more young people, and or women into the industry? Yeah. Like, how do we appeal to the kids that we see? They're my wife's a teacher. I hear secondhand stories. Like a lot of these kids are glued to their iPad or don't really, she asks them like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And a lot of them say, oh, I want to be a YouTuber. So like, how do we steal that thunder and how do we get these kids to be like, oh, I want to make stuff, like this seems fun?
We need to post on YouTube that they can make stuff, that they could have control over the way things come out in the world. Like I know a lot of video gamers are really, really good with like AI. So like appealing or pushing AI on them or robots on them would be a really good way to get them interested. And like kids when they're younger, pushing like toy manufacturing on them. And like my generation is really into social justice. So I feel like, it's kind of hard to like post about social justice as a manufacturer, but obviously maybe like being more interested in people's personalities or personal beliefs or whatever. So like, for example, my family's Muslim. So I really enjoy when certain companies say happy Ramadan to me because it makes me feel like I'm seen and I'm included. Or like this month, it's National Disability Awareness Month, I believe. So we have posters up for that. Shout out to that. Even though it's not really like changing anything, at least you're acknowledging, the people. So I feel like acknowledging that people's differences and all that.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very helpful viewpoint because I don't know that my generation is the same thing. And definitely I don't think the older ones are either. I see a lot of those posts and I'm just like, that's not helping anybody. Like, why would I care? But like to hear that it is effectual or effective for your generation is really good to hear.
And also, like, the younger generation like to see when people with bigger platforms take a stand, because it's like they care about their image, but they also care about what their message they're conveying is.
So what about women? Because like I know, like I've said a few times on here, I've only worked with 2 women, I think, as machinists in my entire career. Like I've had managers that are women and have worked with them in other parts of the business, but like the women machinists I've worked with have been some of the best and most attentive to detail. So like there's so many benefits to bringing women into manufacturing. So what challenges have you come across, and then how can we encourage more women into manufacturing?
I actually know a lot of women that are machinists, but I feel like the reason why there aren't that many more is because a lot of us think that all we're going to be able to do is operate, push buttons, that's it. There really is no, and it's kind of been like shown that there's no real way that we can move up unless we really fight for it. And even then, there's a 50-50 chance. There's honestly a 30-70 chance that you'll get, the position you're fighting for. And so a lot of women are discouraged because of that. And sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes it's not really a safe place for women. People make comments, people make jokes, but like you have to still have respect. And especially now, this generation is very big on respect. They're the type of kids that say, if you don't respect me, I won't respect you. And it does not matter your age. And I low-key can get behind that, because I'm not going to sit there and entertain somebody that's disrespecting me, that's disrespectful to myself. And I care about myself. I care about my well-being. So I think people have to realize that times are changing and you just can't treat people however you want to. And yeah, like you have to be able to take a joke and be able to throw a joke back, but you need to know the lines, If I don't know if that makes sense.
For
but
sure.
my coworkers know the lines.
Makes sense.
They know not to put their hands. For example, my coworkers know they could joke about me, or they could joke with me. That's fine. And they know not to put their hands on me. That's smart. I mean, it's the bare minimum, but a lot of people don't know that. And that's why a lot of women are like, I don't want to be a manufacturer, or I don't want to be a machinist. I don't want to work in a male-dominated industry. But there's so much potential for us in this industry because of that. So I try to encourage a lot of women.
Okay. So I guess a better phrasing in that question is, so if you were sitting down with a woman who was thinking about getting into manufacturing, what are the key bullet points that you'd hit them with to convince them to come into a very male dominated field, or one that, probably needs to grow into accepting more women?
I would say that there's a lot of money in this field. There's a lot of opportunity for growth, although there's a lot of obstacles. A lot of people want to see you succeed. There's a lot of support out there. Like, for example, my whole LinkedIn is all support, like, for me. And low-key, the reason why I feel like I have the confidence to do what I'm doing. So I would tell that woman that she should be in this field because there is so much more for her. I don't really know.
Okay.
I don't really know. Like, why would you want to be in a male-dominated field? I don't know. I don't really know.
Well, and that's I think the hard part. Like that is the hard part, I think, that we're facing for any gender, is like, why we kind of have to change this whole narrative of like, people think machining is this, dirty, grimy profession.
Yeah, and I think we need to kick out I think we need to kick out the male dominated field, like, whole thing, because now I'm thinking about it, like, who cares? Like, I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I was very excited to have you on, because you're killing it. And like, I want to show more women, like, hey, there's people doing it. Like, there's women doing it and just killing it. And like, you've made this change into Swiss lathes and all of that so quickly. Like clearly this is meant for you and you're meant for it. So like I want to show more people that like, hey, this is totally possible. So the other thing you mentioned your LinkedIn, and that was another thing I wanted to ask you about because you're very good at LinkedIn.
Thank you.
I am trying to be better at LinkedIn. How do you do it? I find it like super cringy, or at least a lot of the stuff on LinkedIn is like super cringy, and it just like I want to post something, I'll open the app, I'll see a couple posts that just make me want to close the app immediately and you know, not look at it the rest of the day. So how do you get over that and get the kind of interactions that you want and talk to the people you want? Like what have you found works for you very well?
First of all, I feel like all social media makes me feel that way too. Like it's social media is just sometimes really cringy, but I'm also really young, so social media I could really use as my tool. I like to think of my LinkedIn as my Facebook a little bit. I don't really use Facebook, but like the whole like posting statuses, I like to think of it as like kind of lighthearted. So when I usually start out my posts, I start them out lighthearted. And like I'm young, so like I feel like I use that to my advantage too. And I hashtag bomb like crazy. That's how I feel like that's how I connect with the people that I want to connect with, because I have my specific tags, like my resource tags or my Miss Swiss tag. And then I have all these other tags like CNC Swiss, CNC machining, manual. I don't think I actually have a manual machining tag, but like, you know, stuff like that. Then I'll have women manufacturers, women in manufacturing, women machinists, women who machine, like things like that, that somebody could accidentally look up on LinkedIn and stumble upon my post. Pictures are a big thing. Videos are even better. And I repost like crazy when I do repost, sometimes 8 times out of 10 I will add a caption so that people know that like, hey, I actually did listen to this or read this. I didn't just repost it to repost it. I think it's actually a big deal. And then another way to get people that I want to interact with, me, I'll go to their comments and I'll like write something like a takeaway that I learned from their post or something like that. And then I'll repost their post and then they'll message me back, thank you for sharing. And then like, thank you for telling me what you liked about my post. And then I basically get a connection from that. It sounds really shallow, but it's kind of how social media is. It is a little bit shallow, but it is what it is.
Yeah. It just, for me, it seems like on LinkedIn, it's exceptionally shallow sometimes. And I'm not saying everyone is. Like, I'll look at your content or a few other of my friends that are on there and like they're posting what they're doing. And it's like, cool, I understand you're promoting yourself. That's awesome. Like those are the kind of posts that I'm here for. And then some of them, they just feel, I don't even know how to describe them very well, but like, it just feels like this is a nothing post about nothing just to garner attention, I guess is maybe the best way I can describe it.
I think I stumbled
and it seems
upon
like it's
those.
Yeah, it seems like it's more rampant on LinkedIn than it is on like Instagram.
Mm. I don't really follow people like that. I kind of just block people that post random things. Like, no offense to them, if I don't like your content.
That's fair. That's totally fair. Well, so speaking of one of your hashtags, your resource of the day, can you share some of your other resources that you really like? I'm always trying to give my audience more content that they can get into.
I'm gonna pull out my phone real quick so that I have 175 shows in my podcast station for manufacturing related podcasts. There's a company called Gorilla 76 that makes a bunch of manufacturing marketing related podcasts, and they have I think like 4 or 5 like shows out, and they like constantly update them, but one of them is called The Manufacturing Marketer, and that's a really good one. I really like their music choices. Like production is amazing. Another good one is the Automation Podcast. It's the one with the green gear on it. They also have one that's like the Daily Automation Show, I believe. That's also a really good one. And then like those two have like news tidbits. So I listen to those in like the morning and it makes me feel like I'm listening to the news, like a good citizen. Swarfcast is also a really good one. I like that one a lot. Of course, the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I was on that one, so I love that one. The Manufacturing Executive is also a really good one. Manufacturing Happy Hour is also a really good one. I could keep going. The Manufacturing Employer, Automation Chat, Big Tech's Ordinance. I really like that one. That one's a really good one. I recommend that one. And the Business and Machining is also a really good one. The Big Tech's Ordinance podcast, usually they have like people who make gun parts and like that kind of stuff, and like gun makers and all that. And it's just a cool group of guys, really. And it's like I feel like I'm talking to them when they're talking, and like they're just really funny. A lot of these podcasts, like the hosts too, they're not boring hosts. I like to pick podcasts with hosts that I can actually connect with and listen to, as opposed to zone out to. I like to really be in there. And that's why I take notes on certain podcasts. Like while I'm listening, I'll take notes and then I'll turn them into a resource of the day post. So, I mean, it has to be interesting for me to do that at least,
Awesome. Those are some great podcasts for sure. Let's see. I guess that brings us on to Chop News and new things. So anything new in your world? Anything exciting?
Doing a lot more researching for certification courses. Other than that, just learning, really. That's like the most exciting thing. That's my favorite thing to do is learn. So like learning. Oh, and I'm going to IMTS. I think that's a new thing. Is that a new thing? I'm going to IMTS this year.
Awesome. Okay.
I'll see everybody there. I'm so excited.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I'm pumped.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think Kern and I are doing an Insta Machinist meetup again. I believe it'll be on Wednesday.
At like 3, right?
Yeah, that's when it was the last time. I don't know the time or date exactly yet.
I have the booth number written down already, somewhere on a sticky note. I like heard it at a like while you were saying it at a podcast, and I was at work, so I grabbed a sticky note and I wrote it down. It's like, yep, I'll be there.
Awesome. Well, then that brings me to the last 3 questions I ask every guest every week. First up, what did you research this week? Doesn't have to be manufacturing related, just what's been popping up in your browser.
I've been researching a way that I could edge this blanket that I'm making, because I crochet a lot. So
how'd you get into crochet?
I don't even know. I bought some yarn. I bought a really chunky yarn, and I actually bought knitting needles because I used to knit in 8th grade, and I hated it. I was like, why did I buy these big knitting needles? I'm just gonna crochet with this. And then I realized, oh, I can make a lot more with this. So then I just kept going, and now it turned into this and like random projects everywhere,
So let's say I'm completely ignorant, because I am. What's the difference between knitting and crocheting?
Okay. Knitting is 2 like needles that are like straight, and crocheting is a hook. So this is my 8mm crochet hook, my favorite hook. And then I don't even have my knitting needles because I hate knitting that much. But yeah, I believe crocheting is like loops and like circles, and knitting, I think it's like knots. No, it's not knots, but like knitting is a different sort of pattern.
Okay, so like knitting is probably a tighter weave than crocheting.
You can get pretty tight crochet. You can get really tight with crochet because you can have a really, really small hook. I think they go up to like, well, I have like 2.5 mil, which is my smallest one. But I think they have like little lace ones. I haven't got into that, but I feel like there's just more you could do with crocheting than you can with knitting.
All right, totally fair. That's super cool.
Thank you.
Next up, what are the things you're working on to be a better person, employee, what have you. None of us are perfect. We're all working on stuff.
Mindfulness for sure. I've been doing a lot more like journaling to kind of keep track of my productivity, and I feel like that has been making me a more peaceful person. I feel like I've been like, okay, I've been able to deal with my emotions, whatever they are, and then I'm able to communicate better. And low-key, I feel like crocheting is also making me a better person. Like, it keeps my mind busy. So
Yeah, I could see that. It's a totally meditative type of thing. Well, the last question, and this one's new as of last episode, but what is a win from this week that's worth sharing? So a lesson, something you did really well. What are you excited about you can share?
I had 2 really successful setups this week I'm really proud about. So like those are definite wins. Another win is I just got my first blanket commission for like my crocheting stuff, so that's really cool. Yeah, I think those are 2
That's
of
a
my
super
wins.
big
Yeah.
win.
Thank you.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you.
So on setting up the Swiss, what are you finding to be the biggest things that you're learning? Like where are the where does your attention need to be when you're setting up? Is it, like you said, drills and the big CNCs? Like, is it, do you have live tools? Is it end mills? Like, what are the problem tools and what is like the hardest and the easiest thing to set up?
Problem tools are boring bars. Those are like my least favorite to set up, to be honest. But drills have been easy lately. It was like my first week and I had broken like 2 of them and I was like, oh God, like I really gotta not do that. Definitely boring bars though. Those are the most difficult.
What makes them so difficult?
There's just a lot more there's just like a little more of a process to setting them than there is to like setting a turning tool. But once you know how to set a drill, you know how to set a boring bar. So honestly, they're not really that difficult. I was explaining to somebody the other day, I was like, yeah, as long as you know how to set your cutoff tool, you know how to set all your turning tools. As long as you know how to set one live tool, you could set the rest of them. And if you could set one tool on your subside, then you could set all of them on your subside.
Okay. That's awesome. So how many tools are in a typical setup for the parts you guys make?
Anywhere from like 7 to 9 tools. Sometimes less. Sometimes you'll have like 2 extra tools, depending on if we're broaching something or if we need an end mill. Usually I don't have end mills on my machines.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Nush, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Let everybody know one more time where they can find you.
You can find me on LinkedIn at Nushrat A, I believe. Could also find me on Instagram at Nushrat AH. I'm also on TikTok, so might as well follow me there since you're here. Yeah, and I typically respond really quick on LinkedIn because I'm really active there and I love to connect. So definitely connect with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. And really enjoyed having you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And thanks to all the Patreon members who make this show possible. Let me send people like Nush a mic and headset so you guys can hear her. And thank you all for listening. I will be back next week.